They came in golden ships, wreathed in banners of starlight and pride, emissaries of the Galactic Empire that had ruled the spiral arms for 1,000 years. Worlds had risen and bowed in that time, entire species had been folded into the bureaucracy like ingredients in a vast imperial stew. When Earth sent its first FDL probe sputtering into an established trade lane, the response was not fear, nor interest, just mild amusement. Another bipedal species crawling from its gravity well, waving crude flags, and transmitting a welcome in 100 mismatched languages. The Empire had seen this pattern before. They knew what came next: integration, education, and a century of assimilation into docility. But humans proved annoying. Not violent at first, not arrogant, just persistent. They refused to replace their antiquated chemical propulsion systems. Their politics were fragmented and fractious. Their art was chaotic. Their mathematics were useful but inelegant. And their military technology was downright insulting. During the introductory review of species assets, Earth's delegation presented a data slate of what they called conventional armaments. An alien security analyst almost choked trying not to laugh. Kinetic rifles. Artillery. Explosives that relied on fire and pressure. And the most ridiculous of them all, a belt-fed weapon called the machine gun. The assembled council examined the footage, rows of these crude weapons barking fire, sending brass casings spinning. Smoke. Dirt. Chaos. Not a single plasma burst, no beam harmonics, not even a micrograv suppressor. The senior tactician, a Mantari with 3 brains and 1,000 years of combat modeling experience, openly smirked. They use combustion, he said, voice flat with disbelief. They burn things to make metal move faster. The humans didn't flinch. They explained the mechanics with clarity: gas-operated reloading, barrel cooling, bipod stabilization. They spoke with pride. Not defiance, not arrogance, just a strange, disquieting confidence. One of them, an officer with gray at his temples, added, "It's simple. It doesn't fail. And when it starts speaking, people listen." The Empire chalked this up to cultural bravado. Every species clung to primitive relics for a while: ritual weapons, tribal uniforms, old military chants. No one used those things in actual warfare anymore. Shields rendered projectiles obsolete. Energy dampening fields cancelled momentum. Targeting AIs disabled anything slower than light. So when a diplomatic skirmish broke out on a fringe mining colony, entirely predictable, minor, and according to protocol, the Empire dispatched a single destroyer-class cruiser and a regiment of containment troopers. It wasn't an attack. It was a warning gesture. A display of scale. The standard operating procedure for backwater disputes. The humans responded before the Empire's ship exited warp. A swarm of autonomous drones swirled out from the planetary magnetosphere, blind to plasma signatures, immune to EMP pulses, programmed with direct kill patterns. The cruiser's hull took 7 full seconds of uninterrupted kinetic impact before its shielding failed. They hadn't expected humans to fight so dirty. So quickly. So effectively. No declarations, no stalling tactics. Just an immediate barrage. One containment drop ship made it to the surface intact. It landed in what the aliens thought was an uninhabited zone, an open field bordering a jagged range of cold mountains. 20 minutes later, the last transmission was a garbled scream, asterisk. "They're still shooting!" Asterisk. The council reviewed the report the next day. Casualties, 94%. Hostile tech, unidentifiable but crude. Method, projectile fire. The word appeared a dozen times in the after-action summary. Projectile. One field analyst tried to explain. They use saturation tactics. They don't stop when they suppress. They keep firing until the area is empty. It's not strategic. It's psychological. A young diplomat from the Alaran species leaned forward, intrigued. And these devices? The machine guns? Do they always operate like that? Yes, the analyst replied. And they seem to have a lot of them. There was a pause. The Mantari tactician folded his limbs and hissed in annoyance. So we're frightened by noise and volume now? No, came the quiet reply. We're not frightened. We're confused. They were supposed to be primitive. That word lingered. Primitive. It was said so often in those early days that it lost its meaning. It didn't mean unsophisticated, it meant underestimated. It meant misjudged. Humanity hadn't come to impress. They had come to survive. And in their minds, survival was never clean, elegant, or polite. It was fire, metal, blood, and noise. The Galactic Empire didn't understand yet. But they would. The first full-scale engagement was expected to be over in hours. The Empire deployed an armored vanguard to the outer colonies, fortified, shielded, and equipped with non-lethal containment protocols. Their mandate was not conquest, merely enforcement. The assumption was simple: Earth would resist briefly, then fold, just like every other late-entry species. Instead, contact was lost within minutes. Initial reports were dismissed as transmission errors. Then came the visual feeds, grainy, brutal footage of armored walkers shredded by fire from unseen positions, energy shields overloading under sustained kinetic impact, high-speed projectiles ricocheting with such force they bent composite plating. Empire Command watched, silent, as their elite troops fell to weapons no more complex than gas-propelled metal slugs. One battalion attempted a frontal push through the Argus Ridge choke point. The path was narrow, bordered by uneven terrain. Sensors showed no heat signatures, no powered defenses. The command AI greenlit movement. 30 seconds later, every unit in the forward column was down. No energy pulses had been detected. No tech signature matched any known alien arsenal. The only evidence: shell casings, the torn remains of light armor, and audio logs saturated with the rhythmic pounding of automatic fire. The aliens thought it was a malfunction in their systems. That was their first real mistake. The second was sending reinforcements without adjusting doctrine. Human infantry operated without centralized command protocols. No reliance on satellite guidance, no AI battlefield link. They worked in dispersed cells, passing short encrypted messages, often using analog maps. Their tactics seemed erratic, until analysts realized they weren't reacting to the battlefield. They were shaping it. Ambushes were laid with precision. Routes were mined using low-tech explosives that couldn't be digitally disabled. Every attempt to use hovercraft or skimmers resulted in catastrophic losses. Troopers began refusing to disembark, citing psychological trauma. One report described the sounds of human weapons echoing through canyons long after the fighting had stopped. Another mentioned troopers vomiting uncontrollably at the sound of rapid percussion impacts. Empire leadership convened a high-level review. Weapon analysis revealed the primary armament used was a variant of the general-purpose machine gun, refined through centuries of warfare but still adhering to simple principles: reliability, volume, and raw kinetic output. It didn't operate on smart targeting systems. It wasn't meant to disable, it was meant to kill. Tactical simulations failed to replicate outcomes. Empire training could not account for enemies who embraced chaos. Troops were trained to adapt to energy-based warfare, to anticipate shields, pulses, drones, not terrain-based suppression, overlapping arcs of fire, or units willing to expend thousands of rounds in minutes just to deny movement. One simulation officer noted, "They're not conserving ammunition. They're shaping fear." Planetfall on Halden 3 was a pivotal mistake. A major industrial node, it was assumed to be underdefended. The deployment was clean: drop pods, secured landing zone, standard recon protocols. Within the first hour, over 60% of deployed assets were neutralized. Combat logs revealed weapons firing non-stop, sustained fire so intense it melted barrels. And yet the weapons kept functioning, swapped out, cooled, and fired again. It wasn't just the firepower. It was the human approach. No surrender signals. No retreat indicators. Units stayed in place long past expected withdrawal thresholds, fighting until their positions were overrun or ammunition was gone. They built fallback lines behind fallback lines, forcing the enemy into a perpetual meat grinder. Captured documents revealed this wasn't an accident. It was doctrine. The machine gun wasn't a weapon in human hands. It was a strategy. A mobile line of finality. A declaration that progress would not be permitted. Every valley, every ridge, every corridor became a wall of lead. And behind every wall, another waited. Empire morale collapsed in pockets. Veterans refused redeployment. Rumors spread across fleets. Earth was cursed, its soldiers inhuman, its tactics suicidal. The Empire wasn't fighting for dominance anymore, they were fighting to understand how they were losing. Every countermeasure failed. Cloaking tech was useless. Humans fired in broad sweeps, saturating zones regardless of confirmed targets. EMP didn't matter. Their weapons had no circuits. Gravity fields were ineffective. Human weapons functioned under pressure, heat, cold, even partial vacuum. The Empire had weaponry from 1,000 systems, each more advanced than the last. But none of them could compete with simplicity executed to perfection. The machine gun didn't just fire bullets. It fired intent. It spoke with every pull of the trigger. And what it said over and over was this: "You will not pass." They called it psychological warfare, but that was a generous term. What the machine gun did was more primal. It didn't break formations, it shattered will. The first time the Empire recorded extended audio of sustained fire, their analysts looped it for hours, searching for patterns. There were none. Just an unrelenting rhythm, mechanical and merciless. Troops who heard it in person refused to describe it. One simply said, "It doesn't stop. It never stops." Empire armor was designed for plasma pulses, energy arcs, directed force. Nothing in its composite matrix accounted for tiny chunks of spinning metal moving just below light speed. Kinetic barriers flickered and failed after seconds. The raw volume of fire didn't allow for recovery. Once a gun opened up, the only safe position was behind it, or out of range. Alien tacticians labeled the weapon inefficient. It burned through ammunition rapidly. It lacked precision. But on the ground, precision didn't matter. Suppression was the goal. Control by denial. Humans didn't aim to hit targets. They aimed to own space. 100 meters of terrain behind a machine gun became a death sentence. Every path became a funnel, every doorway a trap. A single squad with 2 guns could stall an entire armored column. Empire troops began reporting auditory hallucinations, phantom bursts echoing during silence. Engineers tested their comms. Nothing was wrong. Medics ran neural scans. No abnormalities. It wasn't the sound itself. It was the memory of it. The anticipation. The helplessness that followed. The moment a gun started firing, it wasn't just a threat, it was a message. Captured footage from a downed alien helmet showed a human operator mid-battle. He adjusted the feed mechanism calmly, wiped sweat from his brow, and resumed firing without pause. No shouting. No panic. Just relentless execution. The analyst reviewing the clip marked one line in his report. Asterisk. "They don't celebrate when they kill. They maintain." Asterisk. Alien ground forces were trained in formation tactics, powered exocets, coordinated AI-assisted strikes. None of it worked when the battlefield became mud, smoke, and noise. The suits jammed with debris. The AIs couldn't parse the chaos. Human positions weren't fixed, they shifted with pressure, flowing like water but hitting like stone. The machine gun wasn't static, it moved. It adapted. Carried, redeployed, turned into a mobile edge of destruction. Empire fireteams learned to recognize the pause between bursts, the momentary click as belts were changed. That was their only chance to move. Seconds, sometimes less. Any hesitation, and the gun resumed its roar. One alien commander noted grimly, "They don't fire to kill. They fire to trap. You either run into it, or you never move again." There was no glory in these fights. No tactical elegance. The Empire expected opponents who honored rules of engagement. Humans offered only outcome. If fire lanes overlapped, they didn't adjust. They accepted the chaos. Friendly fire wasn't an error. It was a price they were willing to pay. The machine guns myth grew. Empire soldiers began calling it the Iron Voice. Units claimed to hear it long before engagement. Some swore it could echo through vacuum. Others believed the weapon chose its own targets, turning only when challenged. Myths didn't matter to human command. They welcomed the fear. They nurtured it. Psychological dominance, once a strength of the Empire, had turned. The war wasn't being won through superiority. It was being won through refusal. Every time a machine gun fired, it declared, "Here is where we stop. Here is where you fail." Empire units tried flanking, elevation, airdrops. Every tactic unraveled under lead. Even when they advanced, they paid dearly for every meter. A field held by a gun was measured not in ground, but in bodies. Human soldiers didn't speak of honor or valor. They spoke of fields covered in brass, of heat warping barrels, of keeping a weapon alive with grease, grit, and blood. When one failed, another took its place. When ammo ran dry, they held position with sidearms. The message never changed. The Empire had faced countless threats. Biological horrors, rogue AIs, planetary insurrections. But they had never faced a species that turned obsolescence into doctrine. Never faced an enemy that turned noise into control. The machine gun wasn't a relic. It was a declaration. And it was being made every single day. The Empire's counteroffensives grew more desperate. Tactical advisors proposed orbital bombardments, automated drones, even localized time distortion fields. But every solution failed in execution. Bombardments destroyed infrastructure the Empire needed. Drones were too fragile, jammed, confused, or shot down before deployment. Time fields disrupted their own logistics more than the humans. Every action met an answer. Not technological. Tactical. Practical. Relentless. Human strategy was not built around dominance. It was engineered around denial. Entire regions were rendered inaccessible not through fortifications, but through layered belts of fire. Automated turrets, hand-cranked repeaters, even tripwire-triggered fallback guns formed a net impossible to cross without massive casualties. Empire Command called it fire lattice warfare. The humans called it standard operating procedure. Attempts at negotiation were ignored. Not because Earth refused diplomacy, but because they'd already decided where they stood. The war wasn't ideological. It wasn't territorial. It was survival. The humans didn't claim victory in speeches. They claimed it in fields soaked with brass and silence. Captured human documents revealed the existence of mobile gun platforms referred to as Duggan Nightmares by Empire troops. These were custom-rigged tripods, often manually repositioned, manned continuously by rotating crews. Each had overlapping fire zones, coded fallback routines, and enough ammunition to sustain hours of suppression. One was reported to have held a valley alone for 16 hours, halting 5 assault waves. Tacticians began to see the pattern. Humans didn't rely on superior numbers or overwhelming technology. They built traps inside behavior. They studied how the Empire moved, reacted, flanked, and then positioned guns not just to stop, but to predict. Empire troops were being funneled, not forced. When a gun opened fire, it wasn't reacting. It was springing a plan already in motion. New units were outfitted with adaptive armor and sound-dampening helmets. It made no difference. Empire medics discovered that hearing the gunfire wasn't the real trigger, it was the anticipation. The expectation of contact. The moment the first shots rang out, discipline broke. Even elite squads staggered under the pressure. A single burst could pin entire platoons. The fear wasn't rational, it was conditioned. Some units began faking injuries to avoid deployment. Others surrendered outright. Those who returned from the front lines came back altered, quiet, jumpy, unable to sleep. Their bodies were intact, but their will had been fractured. The report stopped using words like enemy contact and began substituting phrases like engagement with suppression asset. Command tried to reframe the narrative. They ordered morale campaigns, propaganda, synthetic morale boosts. Still, the ground truth remained. The machine gun had become more than a weapon. It was a symbol. And symbols, once seated, grow roots. Across every battleground, Empire morale slowly dissolved. Humans didn't celebrate their victories. There were no great broadcasts, no trophies. For every advance, they laid more belts. Sharpened their zones. Their presence wasn't measured by land taken, it was measured by how far the Empire refused to go. Analysts reviewed hundreds of reports and finally drew a conclusion no one wanted to voice. They weren't fighting for conquest. They were fighting to be left alone. The Empire's greatest mistake was assuming humans wanted to join. That they desired the stability of galactic order. In truth, humans had been fighting empires long before they reached the stars. They had perfected the art of resistance. What others discarded as outdated, humans refined into doctrine. The machine gun was not a tool, it was the culmination of that doctrine. Even in defeat, the Empire couldn't understand it. Their worlds were built on hierarchy, command structure, clean efficiency. Humans thrived in entropy. They didn't seek order, they exploited it. Wherever systems grew rigid, predictable, efficient, they inserted chaos. And at the center of that chaos, always, was the steady percussion of the gun. It didn't matter that other species had more advanced weapons. None used them with the same resolve. None were willing to bleed, to hold, to grind forward an inch at a time. The machine gun was not a marvel of engineering. It was a statement of willpower, of persistence without elegance. The Empire finally recognized the truth not through a battlefield report or decrypted message, but through silence. Entire sectors they once controlled had gone dark. No retreat. No surrender. Just absence. They'd stopped sending troops. Not because of treaties or terms, but because it wasn't worth it anymore. They could win battles. But every step forward cost more than they could justify. Not in resources, in confidence. Because wherever they advanced, they knew what waited. The same sound. The same resistance. The same message. You will not break us. In the final stages of the conflict, the Empire no longer asked how to win. They asked how to disengage without appearing weak. Their grand fleets remained intact, their factories unscathed, their command structure operational, but none of it mattered. Superiority had become irrelevant. On every front, their might was outpaced not by innovation, but by the iron persistence of a species that refused to yield. The human answer to every incursion remained the same: deny everything, endure anything, and never stop firing. Strategists examined Earth's logistics. By all measures, their supply chains should have collapsed. Ammunition demands were staggering, yet caches never ran dry. Manufacturing hubs operated underground, concealed beneath civilian structures, powered by archaic but robust reactors. The enemy had designed a society around sustained resistance. Efficiency was sacrificed for durability. Simplicity replaced elegance. If a component failed, it could be replaced with scrap. If a system broke, it was patched with human resolve. Empire generals began to avoid specific terms in briefings. Suppression fire, forward push, and close quarters contact triggered quiet dread. The term, gun nest, became synonymous with operational failure. Squads requested reassignment rather than approach entrenched human sectors. The Empire's most decorated units became reluctant to even discuss Earth campaigns. A silent stigma spread. No one wanted to face the guns again. Alien war councils debated total annihilation. Glass the surface, vaporize resistance, sterilize the world. But even those plans unraveled under scrutiny. The cost would be catastrophic. More than that, it would be a confession that the Empire could not overcome this defiance through strength. Every simulation revealed the same outcome: massive planetary damage, civilian death tolls that would incite revolt within the Empire itself, and a legacy of brutality that would outlive victory. And for what? A planet whose only exports were grit and defiance. So they stopped advancing. Quietly. Without retreat orders. No formal announcements. One day, forward deployments weren't reinforced. Patrols were recalled. No new offensives were launched. Empire borders slowly receded, not out of strategy, but exhaustion. The humans didn't chase. They didn't celebrate. They held position, guns ready, as if daring the Empire to try again. Empire historians would struggle to explain the outcome. The records showed overwhelming technological dominance, vastly superior resources, and near-universal control. Yet the final entries were filled with terms like attrition threshold, unsustainable engagement, and unquantifiable resistance factor. One classified report simply stated, "We underestimated not what they had, but what they could withstand." The myth of the machine gun became institutional memory. Empire academies studied the weapon not as an artifact, but as a case study in psychological terrain control. Military textbooks labeled it the doctrine of relentless denial. Cadets were taught to respect it, to fear it, but never to replicate it. Because only humans wielded it as intended, not with glory, but with grim necessity. In time, Empire envoys approached Earth again. Not with ultimatums, but with hesitation. The humans listened, weapons idle but present. No banners flew. No victory parades were held. Just cold eyes behind iron sights. The message remained unspoken, but clear: there would be no treaties, no integration, no acceptance. Earth would not join. Earth would not kneel. Earth would be left alone. And so it was. Galactic charts quietly redrew their lines. Earth became an absence, unclaimed, unchallenged, unspoken. Traders avoided the region. Scouts rerouted around its space. The Empire didn't acknowledge it as a loss. But every officer knew that planet had changed them. It had exposed a flaw in their supremacy. A blind spot for the brutal tenacity of those who fought not to win, but to survive without compromise. The machine gun remained on the ground, unmoved, unfazed, eternal. It had no voice, no sentience, no ambition. Yet it had spoken louder than any fleet, any empire, any grand declaration. You may come with fire and light, with arrogance wrapped in protocol. You may bring science and order, conquest and unity. But if you step too close, if you try to claim what cannot be claimed, you'll hear the sound again. And when you do, you'll remember why you stopped.